Well, welcome to Public House, everybody. I'm so glad that you are logged in wherever you are around the city. I know we've got folks watching from Blacklick to Groveport to Worthington, Grove City, and Hilliard. We are so glad that wherever you are and with whomever you chose to spend the evening, that you are taking time out of your evening to plug in and to engage and stay connected here at Public House. And we are so excited about the ways that God is creating opportunities for us to stay engaged with you and connected with each other. And I really hope that whether you utilize the Public House directory and the challenge that we laid out for you this week, whether you get plugged into our Zoom small groups, which are going to be coming this week as well, that you stay engaged spiritually and connected in community, even though we are distancing ourselves socially. Well, if you've been with us over the last few weeks, you know that we've been in this series called Passover, and we've been journeying our way to the cross by taking a look at not only the origin story of Passover in the Old Testament, but the ministry of Jesus and the times in which the Gospels tell us that Jesus was celebrating Passover, and those crazy intimate moments that happened between Jesus and the disciples, Jesus and the Gentiles, Jesus and the Pharisees, all the different interactions that he had with people during the celebration of Passover, because it's important for us to understand the significance of Passover to really, truly be able to celebrate the heart of Easter. And we're getting closer to that. Over the next couple of weeks, we're journeying even closer to the cross. If you have your Bibles tonight, or if you have the YouVersion Bible app, which is probably the easiest way for you to follow along. If you don't have the YouVersion Bible app, download it real quick. Go to the bottom of the screen, hit More and Events and Live Events, and you can search for Public House. It should pop up pretty quickly. And it's an easy way for you to stay plugged in, easy way for you to follow along tonight. If you're old school like me, you have your Bibles, we're going to be looking at a passage of Scripture found in the book of John, chapters 11 and 12. Now, here's the background behind this, while many of you are still finding it. John chapter 11 and John chapter 12 are the week or so leading up to the final Passover that Jesus would ever celebrate on earth. This is the last week or two of Jesus' life, and what we find out in this passage is that Jesus is kind of amping up the sense of urgency for all of his followers to begin to really understand what he has come here to do. And in John chapter 11, and we're going to begin reading in a few verses in this, in John chapter 11, there's this interaction that takes place between Jesus and some of his closest friends that actually seem very counterintuitive to what you would expect Jesus to do, but it gives us a bigger glimpse into Jesus' bigger purpose. So would you begin reading with me in John chapter 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair, which we're actually going to see in a minute. He gives a precursor to that. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you're going back there? And Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light. After he said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. And Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there, so that you may believe. But let's go to him. And Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. Many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never not die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe that you're the Christ, the Son of God, who has come to this world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out. They followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. Come and see, Lord," they replied. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he have opened the eyes of the blind man, kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. But the Lord said, "Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been there for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. And Jesus said, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." This is one of those stories that I love to talk about. I love to think about. I wish that I were there when this happened, because I would love to have seen specifically just watching this amazing event unfold. But can you imagine, put yourself in the shoes of Mary and Martha. They know who Jesus is. They're some of his closest friends. Lazarus is one of Jesus' closest friends. And when Lazarus gets sick, they send word to Jesus. "Jesus, quick, we know you can heal him. Get over here. He's sick. Come and heal him. Take care of this problem. We want you to heal our brother." Now, most of us would expect that Jesus would drop what he's doing, go and run and take care of his friend. But Jesus stops, he pauses, he waits a couple more days. And he says to his disciples, "I'm not going to go yet. I could go heal him. I could leave right now. It's just a couple miles for us to get to where we need to go. Like, we could get there. It's not a big deal. But there's a bigger thing that I want to do. So we're going to wait here a couple days. We're going to keep doing ministry. And then we're going to go and do something even bigger than what anybody expects." You ever had a big expectation for God? And it didn't seem like he was wanting to answer or come through for you the way that you wanted him to? What do we do when Jesus doesn't turn out to be what we're expecting, or when Jesus doesn't live up to our expectations? We're living in a really uncertain and unsteady time right now, aren't we? I don't know about you, but not a day goes by where there's not questions going through my mind on how are we going to get through this, and when is this going to be over? And there's not a day that doesn't go by where Aaron and I don't get on our knees or lay down together and pray that God would take away this disease and this virus from our world. There's some expectations that we have, especially as followers of Jesus, for Jesus, isn't there? Like, we expect that he's going to take care of our needs. He's going to supply our needs. We hope that he cares enough about what's going on in our lives that he would meet our wants and our desires. And the truth is, and we talked about this last week, he is the bread of life, and he cares about the things that are concerning to us. But what happens when Jesus doesn't meet our expectations? In this story, just days leading up to Passover, the final time that Jesus would celebrate Passover on earth, his friends, Mary and Martha, had a high expectation for Jesus, and he didn't meet them. He didn't live up to those expectations. And so when Jesus finally makes it to Bethany, when Jesus finally gets to where he's headed, when Martha sees him and Mary sees him, they are so upset because he didn't show up when they expected him to, and he didn't do for them what they knew he could do. He didn't live into their expectations for them. I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life when that has been true. And when that happens, the real question for us is, what do we do with our faith walk when Jesus doesn't seem to live up to or meet the expectations that we have placed on him? You know what's interesting is after this story, after Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, which is amazing, we see other instances leading up to Jesus' death where people didn't think that Jesus lived into his expectations. In fact, in the next chapter, we find that Jesus is hanging out at Mary and Martha and Lazarus, the newly resurrected Lazarus' house. Can you imagine being there at their home and Lazarus is just walking around like nothing had ever happened? Like, I can't even get my head wrapped around that. And as Jesus is hanging out with them, Mary, who John references in John chapter 11, Mary goes and finds this expensive bottle of perfume that would have been worth about a year's worth of wages. And she breaks the bottle open and she anoints Jesus with this bottle of perfume. Now, you and I, after seeing what Jesus had done for Lazarus, raising him from the dead, that makes total sense, right? Like, she wants to worship God. She wants to honor Jesus. She wants to celebrate what Jesus had done. But over in the corner is the guy who takes care of all of the disciples' finances. His name's Judas. It's the same guy who just in a week or so will betray Jesus. And Judas is not happy at all watching this celebration and this worship happening between Mary and Jesus. In fact, he says, why are you wasting all of this? Like, he doesn't understand why she's being so wasteful with something so expensive. And Jesus has to look at Judas and say, Judas, listen, man, this is bigger than money. This is bigger than your expectations. See, Judas had an expectation that Jesus was going to take care of him socially and take care of him financially. Like, to follow Jesus for Judas was an elite social opportunity. It was a business opportunity. And Judas was actually making money off of it, because we know through other scriptures that he was actually stealing from the treasury that the disciples had. Like, this was a dude who had a different expectation for Jesus. And Jesus had to remind him, Judas, your expectation for me is not a valid expectation for me. Just a couple days later, just a little while later, Jesus begins his entry into Jerusalem from Bethany. And we know this, we celebrate this as Palm Sunday, which we'll celebrate as a church next week. Jesus rides into Jerusalem in this triumphal entry, and all the Jews that are present, every single one of them, are lining the road, and they are waving palm branches and throwing palms down on the ground, celebrating and crying, Hosanna, King, save us. Like, he was this conquering king in their mind. And all of the Jews, as he's riding into Jerusalem, have an expectation for Jesus that he's going to be a conquering king. He's going to deliver them from their oppressor. He's going to save them by taking down the Roman Empire. They had an expectation for Jesus. But it didn't take long for them to realize that Jesus wasn't going to live up to their expectations of him. In fact, Jesus made it very clear that I haven't come to do the things that you think I'm coming here to do. And it didn't take very long for those people who were crying Hosanna to turn on him and yell crucify, because they were upset that he didn't meet their expectations. In 2 chapters, John 11 and John 12, we see 3 very powerful instances where people had an expectation of Jesus that fell short of the standard that Jesus had actually come to accomplish. And in every one of those cases, all of those people were upset and frustrated that Jesus had not lived into what they wanted him to do for them. Now, we never have that problem, do we? Like, we never get upset when Jesus doesn't meet our needs or answer our prayers the way that we want him to in the time that we want him to meet them. We never have that problem, do we? That's somebody else's problem. That's not our problem. If only that were true. Because the reality is all of us struggle like Mary and Martha. All of us at some point or another struggle the way that Judas did. And all of us struggle the way that the Jewish people did at the triumphal entry. We have an expectation, our expectation, that we try to place onto Jesus. And we say, Jesus, we want you to live up to our expectations and deliver on what we want, rather than sitting back and embracing Jesus for who he really is. If you're taking notes tonight, I want you to write this down. The Jesus that we need often looks very differently than the Jesus that we think we want. The Jesus that we need often looks very differently than the Jesus that we think we want. What happens when God doesn't show up the way that we want him to? When we don't see what we want, when we don't get what we want, we don't see him move the way that we want him to move. It doesn't turn out the way that we want it to turn out. Well, the reality is for many of us, we grow a little despondent or angry or frustrated or sad, or we struggle with faith to the point where we don't know if we believe anymore. All because we have set an expectation for Jesus that we think he needs to meet without ever realizing that that's not his expectation at all. That's not his mission at all. That's not what he came to do at all. You see, Jesus cares about what I want, but he wants to meet my deepest need. And many times what we do is we relegate Jesus to fitting into our mold of expectations rather than asking him, what is it that you want to do in my life? What do I most need? And will you come and meet that need? You see, Martha wanted a different Jesus. She wanted a different Jesus that would heal Lazarus when he's sick. And Judas wanted a different Jesus because he wanted a Jesus that would take care of him socially and financially rather than allow this woman to anoint him with this perfume. And the Jews wanted a very different Jesus. They wanted a conquering king, and they didn't necessarily want the Jesus that they got. But here's the thing. The Jesus that you and I need is always bigger than the Jesus that we think we want. The Jesus that you and I need is always bigger than the Jesus that we think we want. You see, Mary and Martha said to Jesus, we want you to heal our sick brother. That's what we want. And Jesus said, well, that's great, but I want to raise him from the dead. Judas said to Jesus, I want you to care more about my social game and my financial status. I want you to care about that. That's what I want, Jesus. And Jesus said, well, that's all well and good, Judas, but I would rather you care more about your eternal soul. The Jews said to Jesus, we want you, we want you to be our king, and we want you to overthrow our oppressor, and that's what we want of you. And Jesus said, well, I've come so that you can crucify me. I've come so that my death would offer eternal life for everyone else. You see, our expectations for Jesus always fall short of his mission and purpose in our lives. And it's dangerous when we begin to put our expectations on Jesus rather than embracing who Jesus is and recognizing that what we need from him is always bigger than what we think we want for him. Why do we feel like it's okay to make Jesus fit into our mold and our expectations? At the end of John chapter 12, verse 43, we see that there were some Jewish leaders and some Jewish people that didn't want to believe in Jesus. And the reason that they didn't want to fully commit their faith in Jesus, it says in verse 43, because they loved the praise of man more than the praise from God. In other words, they cared more about earthly temporary things than they did eternal things. And when that becomes true for us, when we become so overwhelmed or so focused in on the temporary we have a tendency to try to fit Jesus into our box of expectations and into our mold of wants and desires. When we do that, we're settling for way less than what God's mission and purpose is for our lives, because the Jesus that we need often looks very differently than the Jesus that we think that we want. And this is why, guys, I want you to write this down. Number 2, Jesus came to save our souls, not fix our problems. Jesus came to save our souls, not fix our problems. Unfortunately, that's not how we view God anymore, is it? We view God as either a galactic fixer-upper or a cosmic killjoy. That's what we look like. God, you are the one who's going to fix all of our problems. Or God, because you don't answer or meet our wants when we want them, you're just a cosmic killjoy. That's often how we relegate God. In John chapter 12, verse 45, Jesus says, he kind of sums everything up of the last couple days in these 2 chapters. And he says this, he said, guys, I've come to be a light in darkness. I've come to be a light in darkness. Not to be your vending machine, not to be a miracle worker or magically make your lives better or even destroy everyone and everything that oppresses or makes your life difficult. I've not come to do those things. I've come to be light in darkness. This is a huge problem for many of us, because when we don't get what we want, or when Jesus doesn't meet our expectations, we have a tendency to harden our hearts, don't we? Like there's a part of us that feels deeply wounded or offended that God didn't meet our needs, or Jesus didn't show up the way that we wanted him to. And this hardening of our hearts over time can cause our faith to just begin to fall apart. That's where things get tricky. You see, when the Jesus we need isn't the Jesus we want in the moment, our hearts begin to get calloused and hardened. And John tells us that when we have a different expectation of Jesus, when we want Jesus to fit into our box and our world and solve our problems and meet our needs, rather than us submitting to his will and his plans and his purpose, eventually, if we continue to push that envelope, eventually God turns us over to our hardened hearts and we miss out on grace altogether. Ironically, actually, it's probably not ironic, it's providential that in this passage we see in verse 40 that God turned these people over to their hardened hearts. And it got me thinking, man, I've heard that before. Where have I seen that? And I was like, oh man, I know where I've seen that. It happened at the first Passover. In the book of Exodus. Whenever we studied this a couple of weeks ago, and all of these plagues are befalling Egypt as God is trying to urge Pharaoh to let his people go. And what happens? Pharaoh constantly, and he always keeps saying back to Moses, I want this from your God. I want to see this happen from your God. And he's trying to set his own expectations for God. And eventually what happens? God says, fine, if you want it your way rather than my way, then I'll just harden your heart. I will give you over to your hardened heart. It doesn't mean that he is turning this person to not liking or loving him. He's just saying, if that's the desire of your heart, if you want what you want more than what I want, I will allow your hearts to be hardened in that way. And so Pharaoh's heart was hardened to the point where the first Passover happened. And now here we are in the final Passover that Jesus, he's about to celebrate his final Passover on earth. And he says the same thing happened to the Jewish people this day that happened to the Egyptians in that day. It happened to Pharaoh in the first Passover. It happened even with Israel's first king, Saul. It happened to the Jews in John chapter 12. And guys, I want you to hear me when I say this. If we're not careful, it'll happen to us. When we decide that we want Jesus to meet our expectations, rather than us surrendering our will to his plans and his purpose, and if we continue to do that over and over and over, our hearts will become calloused and hardened to the person of Jesus and what God really wants for our lives. It's dangerous to set our expectations of Jesus based on our human wants and desires. It begs the question, do I want Jesus more than I want what he can do for me? And if we're not careful, we can become so consumed by our expectations for Jesus that we miss Jesus altogether. I want you to catch this. Judas followed Jesus for 3 years, but during the entire time, all that he wanted was for Jesus to fit into his box, into his mold. He wanted Jesus to be what he wanted him to be. And when Jesus didn't live up to his expectation, Judas' heart was hardened, and he decided Jesus wasn't for him. How sad is it that a man who got to see first person the beauty and the grace and the love of Jesus in action missed out on Jesus altogether because he wanted Jesus to meet his expectations rather than surrender himself to God's will for his life? Hear me when I say this. Jesus came to save our souls, not fix our problems. And don't get me wrong, he cares deeply about what's going on in our lives, and he does want to meet needs. He does, right? Like, he really wants to meet needs. He healed the sick, he raised the dead, he did all kinds of miracles, he fed hungry people. Like, don't get me wrong, Jesus wants to meet those needs, but that should not be our standard of expectation for him, because Jesus did all of those things as icing on the cake. But the real reason why Jesus came was to be light in darkness, to offer us salvation for our souls, to free humanity, to redeem mankind, to make it possible for the entire world to come back into a loving relationship and a right relationship with God the Father. And you see this at the end of John chapter 12, don't you? In those last few verses of John chapter 12, as he's summarizing to the Greeks and to the Jews who are listening why he came, he says this: if you're going to believe anything that I have to say, it's not my message, it's God the Father's message. I'm trying to be the mediator and the moderator to bring humanity back into a right relationship with God. And any expectation that you have of me that is less than that is missing the boat. If you're taking notes, write this down. Number 3. When you and I open our hearts up to who Jesus really is, we unexpectedly find that he's way more than we ever thought we needed or wanted him to be. But it requires us to open ourselves up to the person of Jesus. Why is it that often the Jesus we want pales in comparison to the Jesus that we need? Well, I think it's because our expectations are just based on our human desires. And we forget that our deepest need is Jesus himself. Your biggest need, my greatest need, is the person of Jesus, not all the things that he can do for us. That's why Jesus came. That's what Jesus is dealing with during this last week or so of his life. With Lazarus' death and Judas' criticism and the triumphal entry, he was dealing with human expectations that fell far short of his mission. It's as if Jesus were saying, I didn't come here to heal your sick, although I've done it. I didn't come here to even raise your dead, but I've done it. I didn't come here to be the conquering king that you want, even though I could do that. I didn't come to calm your storms, although I'm capable. I came to rescue you from darkness. I've come so that you can have life to the full. I've come so that you can have a right relationship with my Father. I have come to redeem you. All the other stuff is icing on the cake. Yet too many of us mistake the icing for the cake. Every night, after Aaron and Ellie go to bed, I find myself praying for a miracle. Many of you are as well, right? And that's rightfully so. Christians should be interceding on behalf of the world to God. Like, that's part of our role as Christians. We should be begging God to move and heal and to intercede. Like, that's part of what we're supposed to do. But I have to confess, I think that sometimes I get so caught up in praying for a miracle that I forget that the miracle was Jesus. And he already did what he came here to do. The miracle was what Jesus did in his life, death, and resurrection. He accomplished everything that he came here to do. And anything else, any miracles of healing, any ways that God chooses to provide, any financial gain, any blessing that God pours out on us, all of that is just icing on the cake. Because what I really need has already arrived in the person of Jesus. What the world needs most was taken care of on a cross. It was lived out in the person of Jesus, in his death and the power of the resurrection. That's what we need, and that's why Jesus came. The expectations that we put on Jesus fall way short of the real need that we have. And here's the deal. We should continue to pray for miracles. We should continue to pray for God's blessing. He calls us to cast our anxiety and our cares upon him, because he cares for us. But all of that is icing on the cake. It is not the real reason why he came. He came because God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. A light in darkness, a redemption for mankind, a restoration of a right relationship between mankind and God the Father. That's why Jesus came, and that's the miracle of Jesus. Do you want to know why we have hope in the midst of tragedy and sorrow? Do you want to know why we could celebrate even if God isn't answering our prayers the way we want him to? It's because Jesus has already done what he came here to do and has already been exactly what the world needs. Salvation has come, and everything else is just icing on the cake. Healing the sick, raising people from the dead, providing for us financially, ridding the world of a virus, answering our wants. That's all just icing on the cake. Blessings that we don't deserve from a God who loves us. But it's not why Jesus came. It's not what he came here to do. Jesus' mission was always bigger than meeting our expectations of him. Jesus didn't come to meet my expectations. He came to be my Savior. I think that's why Paul said in Philippians chapter 1, verse 21, while he was finding himself in heaps of trouble and all kinds of pain and heartache, and he's choosing joy, and he says this, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." I think what Paul is saying is, I'm tired of putting my expectations on God. I'm tired of placing my expectations on Jesus. No, Jesus is enough. Jesus is the miracle. Because I want you all to hear me when I say this. I don't want this virus to harden our hearts. I don't want us to focus so much on the Jesus that we want right now that we miss the Jesus that we need. I want us to understand that however God chooses to intervene, whatever blessings he chooses to give us, and however he chooses, and whichever prayers he chooses to answer, those are simply icing on the cake, blessings that we don't deserve. But the real miracle is that Jesus came, and that Jesus did what he came here to do and fulfilled his mission, which was so much bigger than what our expectations are that we often place on him. Maybe you're sitting there tonight at home and you're scared to death. I understand. We have those moments too. And maybe you say, Aaron, I desperately need a job, or I desperately need God to provide finances, or I desperately want God to heal my friend or my family member. I desperately want God to get us back to normalcy. I desperately want God to heal our land and remove this virus from us. I desperately want all those things. Listen, God cares about every single one of those things. You better believe he cares about those things. He cares about what is affecting us. But that is not the expectation that we should have when it comes to the work of Jesus in our life. The expectation is Jesus is all that we need. And he has already done all that he came here to do. And everything else, every other blessing, every other answer to prayer is just more grace and mercy poured out that we don't deserve. So if you're sitting there tonight and you're like, man, I want that. I need that kind of hope. I need that kind of peace. I want you to know it's found in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And it's found in your personal relationship with Jesus that is way bigger than any of the things that we think we want him to do for us. And all that we have to do is submit ourselves to the life and the will and the mission and the purpose of Jesus Christ. And we find salvation that is way bigger than anything else that we ever thought we needed or wanted. And the beautiful thing is, he's already accomplished everything necessary for us to experience that. So if there's anything that I want you to take away this week, I want it to be this. Jesus didn't come to meet our expectations. He came to make it possible for us to meet his. He didn't come to meet our expectations. He came to make it possible for us to meet his. The God of the universe looked down and he saw that the best that we had to offer was filthy rags and that nothing we could do would be enough. So he sent Jesus. And it may not have been the Jesus that everyone thought they wanted, but it was definitely the Jesus that all of us so desperately needed. And it's the same Jesus that offers us bigger hope than we could ever imagine today. What do we do when Jesus doesn't meet our expectations? Well, I think we just realize that the Jesus that we need might just look very differently than the Jesus we think we want. Would you pray with me? Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for the way that you have been moving among us, even across this digital platform, in houses all around the city. And I sense that your Spirit has been convicting many of us in our houses, that maybe we have been trying too hard to place our expectations on you rather than simply embracing the miracle that is you. We're going to continue to pray that you intercede and heal our land. We're going to continue to pray that you meet our human needs and our desires. But Lord, help us to realize that there's a difference between praying for your grace and your mercy and placing an expectation on you that is far less than the mission that you came to accomplish. Because you came to seek and save those who were lost. You came that we might have life and have it to the full. You came that we don't have to perish, but instead can have eternal life. And that is so much bigger than our earthly expectations and our wants and our desires. And Father, if there's someone right now watching this, listening to this, I pray, Lord, that you would soften, maybe even calloused and hardened hearts, and allow them to embrace the miracle that is you and the love and the grace that is found in accepting you and embracing you as Lord and Savior. And if that's someone tonight, I pray that they would just simply say, Lord, we're sorry for putting you into any other box, and we're sorry for falling short of the standard that you have for us. We want you to be our Savior and our Lord. And for many of us who have been trying to live into this in the midst of fear and sorrow and heartache and pain, even in the midst of this time with this virus, I pray that you'll help us to understand that you've already accomplished more in your life, death, and resurrection than we could ever really need on earth. And may that be what gives us our ultimate hope and joy, even in the midst of the suffering and pain and the heartache that a sin-filled, cursed earth brings to us from time to time. Lord, you are all that we need. You're all that we need. And may we lean in on you now more than ever. And may our expectations of you be rooted in what you did in your life, death, and resurrection, rather than what we selfishly want for you to accomplish in our lives today. And in the midst of that, we'll continue to pray for the icing on the cake, that you pour out your blessings on us, that you pour out your healing on our world, that you provide for us for everything that we need. But that, Lord, is secondary to what you did for us on the cross. Lord, we love you. Thanks for loving us. Amen. Guys, thanks for being a part of our worship community. Stay plugged in, stay connected, stay involved, get connected into one of our small groups online that launched this week, and make sure that your expectation of Jesus is rooted in what he did in his life, death, and resurrection, more than what your wants and desires are here on earth. Have a great week. We love you. Stay healthy. Stay safe.